We've seen the debates and read the polls. Tonight, the first votes in the 2020 Democratic presidential primary will be counted in more than 1,700 caucuses across the state of Iowa. John Yang has been in Iowa over the weekend. He begins our coverage.
Plenty of snow, parkas, and coffee. Lots of cheering. And a live concert. Where else but Iowa in a presidential election year?
And it's the image of that first day that the sun comes up over Dubuque, and for the first time, Donald Trump is no longer the president of the United States.
We must beat Donald Trump.
We are going to defeat this dangerous president.
The heart of America is so much bigger than the heart of the guy in the White House.
You're a terrible president for working Americans. You've done a terrible job for them economically. You, sir, are incompetent. That's the reason you have to go.
I am the heaviest betting favorite to defeat Donald Trump in a head-to-head matchup of anyone in the field.
I do have a nickname I want to give him. Former President Donald Trump.
But this time, Iowa voters say it feels different.
There's a whole lot more urgency this year than in previous years, considering what we've seen just this past week, considering what we've seen for the past 3 years.
It feels like if we don't elect someone other than Donald Trump, that our democracy might not be a democracy.
I've never, ever felt the need to replace a president as much as I need it right now.
Iowa exemplifies the seismic shift the nation felt with President Trump's election. 31 counties, the most of any state, backed President Obama twice and then went for Mr. Trump. Among them, Dubuque County, a working-class area in eastern Iowa along the Mississippi River. The last Republican presidential nominee to win here had been Dwight Eisenhower in 1956. In their closing arguments this weekend, candidates said they could bring the area back to the Democratic fold. Former Vice President Joe Biden.
We have to unite not only the Democratic Party, we have to unite the country.
That appeals to Ron Healy, a retired United Auto Workers member and Vietnam veteran.
I think that we have a candidate in Joe Biden that can help us put a country back together and put us in a positive direction with a president that when he speaks, we know it's the truth, that we don't have to wonder if it's possibly a popularity contest or some childish maneuver by an immature president.
College professor Louise Camus likes Biden's many years of public service.
Why? Experience and return government to civility and follow protocol and not be a lone ranger and again, just be civil and, I think he can unite people. I think he can bring independence into support the Democratic candidate.
A broad appeal is also part of the message former South Bend, Indiana Mayor Pete Buttigieg is delivering.
Sometimes you may get the message that we got to choose between either a revolution or the status quo. I think there's another way.
That speech won him the support of Joanne Stager.
I went to a rally yesterday in Dubuque, and I thought he was very, very convincing and very straightforward in what he said. He could do or should do what we need done.
The last Democrat Virgil Murray voted for, John F. Kennedy. Tonight, he's also going to caucus for Buttigieg.
I think he will bring the country together. I think he's young. I think he's kind of the future of America. I think we need to look forward rather than stay with the status quo.
This is the campaign where the working class of America is going to stand up and say loud and clear, enough is enough.
Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders drew Bree Moss and her partner Louis Meyer into political activism. In 2016, they caucused for the first time.
I joined my college Democrats and voted for Obama, but that was about the extent of it until he said, hey, come check out this guy on Bill Maher. He's pretty cool, and just snowballed from there.
This year, they're volunteer organizers for the Sanders campaign. Moss, a waitress, is the newly elected chair of the Dubuque Democratic Socialists.
I'm a type 1 diabetic, and I was diagnosed when I was 12 years old. Grew up with a single mom, and even though she's always had a good union job, you know, with the good health insurance, we still struggled to afford a lot of our co-pays and things like that. So I believe that health care is a human right, and Senator Sanders is the only person I trust to guarantee that.
Meyer, who works at John Deere, Dubuque's biggest employer, is less concerned about defeating President Trump and electing a Democrat as he is about fundamentally changing the country.
The Joe Bidens, you know, this idea that we have to find a spot in the center so that we can compromise to get things done, and I don't buy that at all. We don't have to compromise, we just need to organize.
But for a lot of Iowa Democrats, beating President Trump is so important they're afraid to make the wrong decision. Retired college professor Harlow Haddo wonders whether it will take a moderate or a progressive.
I do think about that, and that's why I'm still undecided, is because I'm still wrestling with those issues.
Retired math teacher Peggy Magner.
And a lot of us in Iowa are taking great care about choosing our candidate. But we aren't sure whether what we're looking at is actually going to work. Like we say, we want someone who can beat Donald Trump. But then we think, well, do we know who can beat Donald Trump? Is Donald Trump going to be elected anyway?
And John Yang joins me now from Iowa's capital city, Des Moines, on the Drake University campus, where a couple of caucuses are being held tonight. Also joining us is longtime Iowa political reporter David Yepsen. He's the host of the program Iowa Press on Iowa PBS. Hello to both of you. What an exciting time. So, John Yang, given the fact that there is this desire to beat President Trump, tell us more about the candidates' pitches coming into voting time.
Well, Judy, it really was electability, electability, electability. Candidates telling crowds across the state this weekend that they were the candidates who could defeat President Trump in November. And not only that, but also sort of hearkening back to 2016 and saying that they were the ones who could unify the Democratic Party. That also a little bit of an indirect or gentle shot at Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont, as polls showed him getting a bounce amid the criticism resurfaced last week by Hillary Clinton that he did not do enough to unify the party, to bring the party together in November of 2016. So that was the basic message across the state.
So, David, we just heard in John's report that a lot of Iowa Democrats still not decided, not sure what they're going to do. You talk to a lot of voters. What are they telling you?
Well, it very much is electability. More so than ever before in all the caucuses I've covered, this issue of electability is critical. You know, Iowa Democrats have been told so often they're important that they really believe it. And they know it's a close election. This campaign started the day after Donald Trump was elected. And they want to find a candidate who can get to 270 electoral votes. A lot of criticism of Iowa being a bad place to start this process, atypical state, but it's a rural state. And if Democrats are going to beat Donald Trump, these activist Democrats here understand they have to do better in rural areas of America, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Florida. And so that's very much on their mind that this isn't just about a local contest here. It's about a national contest and getting a nominee who can carry votes in rural America.
And John, I know you're also talking to voters who are still not decided. What are you hearing from them?
Well, the thing that struck me, Judy, and certainly David has spoken to many more voters than I have, but the thing that struck me were voters who said it wasn't so much what the candidates were saying, it was what the feeling they gave. We talked to Dave Scudiere and his wife, Karen, who we met at a Bernie Sanders rally in Cedar Rapids, they're both Republicans, disaffected Republicans. They said it wasn't so much what they were going to hear, it's what they were going to feel from the candidates. They wanted to pick a candidate who was going to energize voters, who could make a connection with voters, who could get voters out to the polls in November. That was the thing that we heard from a lot of other Iowa voters. It wasn't so much the policies, it wasn't so much the positions, it was the emotion, the excitement that they could generate.
And David, I've known you a long time. You've covered a lot of these elections, a lot of these caucuses over the years. What's different this year?
Well, just the size of this thing, Judy. It has lasted longer. The crowds are bigger. They estimate it'll be close to 300,000 people. I mean, it's a long way from those small, intimate days in somebody's kitchen table talking to a presidential candidate. This is a full-blown campaign, a couple thousand media people, caucus tourists who are coming in from other states to watch the campaign. It's just much larger, maybe too big. We'll have to see.
And John, I want to come back to you on this question of voters feeling pressure to get it right. How are they demonstrating that when you talk to them?
A lot of it, Judy, is that they just haven't decided or hadn't decided when we talked to them this weekend. They were still holding on. They wanted to hear one more rally, one more speech to make sure that the feeling that they had, that their judgment of the candidates was accurate. And as you heard in that piece, there's so many voters who are worrying about making this right decision. As someone, I think actually David said it earlier in a conversation off camera, it's like when you have high expectations for your kids, the children just get so worried about meeting those expectations that they just sort of freeze up. And I think a lot of people, as they head into these caucuses tonight, are still struggling. Will they pick the right candidate who can beat Donald Trump? Especially because they're the first ones. They're sort of setting the tone for this contest.
And David, this is not as if Iowa isn't used to having the eyes of the nation on it, though, is it?
No, it's a process that's likely to keep going. Already, the 2024 campaign on the Republican side has started. Vice President Pence is on a bus tour in western Iowa earlier. So it never ends in this state. And the interesting thing to watch, Judy, is with these candidates, many of them won't make it very much farther, but they have elevated themselves in the national stature. And I think you'll see one of the patterns we see in Iowa. Maybe you don't win, but you sure make yourself a player on the national stage. Maybe you run again.
Fascinating, fascinating. David Yepes and John Yang, thank you both. We can't wait till tonight.